As we journey through life, one reality becomes increasingly clear. Not everyone we meet is meant to stay. People enter our world, sometimes filling it with warmth, connection, and shared memories. But eventually, many of them walk away, change direction, or reveal they were never emotionally present the way we hoped. When that happens, it leaves us with a heavy question. How do we move forward when the emotional ties that once grounded us begin to unravel? It's not just about losing someone. It's about navigating the storm of emotions that follows. The confusion, the longing, even the self-doubt. You might ask yourself, why do I still care so much? How do I let go of this attachment without feeling like I'm giving up part of who I am? This emotional struggle is timeless, and it's exactly the kind of inner conflict that ancient Stoic thinkers sought to understand. Not to suppress emotion, but to transform our relationship with it. They believed that true resilience comes not from hardening our hearts, but from learning how to hold our emotions gently, without letting them rule us. Detaching doesn't mean turning cold or shutting yourself off. It means reclaiming the space within you that belongs to peace, clarity, and reason. It's about seeing people and relationships for what they are. Important, yes, but not the sole source of your identity or happiness. In the rest of this video, we'll uncover 5 profound principles inspired by the teachings of Marcus Aurelius. These insights are not abstract philosophies. They're practical tools you can use to create emotional balance in your life. If you've ever felt trapped by feelings you wish you could release, or long to find peace in the midst of personal change, what's coming next may help you build the calm center you've been looking for. Number 1. The power of detachment. Why is learning to let go so vital for our emotional well-being? The answer lies in how much power we unknowingly hand over to others when we tie our sense of peace, value, or happiness to them. When your internal state is deeply entangled with someone else's actions or words, you become reactive instead of resilient. It's as if your emotional world depends on circumstances you can't shape, and that's a fragile way to live. The more we obsess over maintaining control of relationships or outcomes, the more we set ourselves up for disappointment. The truth is, the tighter you grip something or someone, the more fear you generate about losing it. That fear can subtly start running your life, influencing your choices, your mood, and even how you see yourself. This is where the ancient Stoic thinkers offered a different lens. They understood that freedom doesn't come from avoiding emotions, but from putting them in their rightful place. They didn't ask us to be indifferent, but to be wise in where we invest our emotional energy. According to them, a stable life isn't built by clinging, but by choosing what truly deserves space in your inner world. Let's think of it this way, not with strings or kites, but with a simple image. Imagine your attention as sunlight. Wherever you focus it, things grow. When you shine it fully on things you can't control, like how someone feels about you, or whether a situation will turn out the way you want, you risk wasting that energy. But if you redirect that light toward your own values, your purpose, and your daily actions, you begin to grow something far more sustainable: self-possession. The Stoic approach to emotional detachment isn't about withdrawing from connection. It's about approaching relationships and challenges with strength and clarity. It means recognizing when your emotions are being hijacked and learning to return to center, to choose how you respond, rather than being dragged by impulsive reactions. To take this from concept to practice, start by observing what consistently disturbs your peace. Who or what seems to hold a disproportionate influence over how you feel? Then, dig deeper. What are you afraid would happen if you stopped caring so much? Often, What keeps us bound is not love, it's fear. Fear of being abandoned, misunderstood, or feeling empty. But that fear loses its grip when we begin to fill our lives with things that align with who we are, not who we're trying to please. Focus on what uplifts your character, on actions that reflect your values, and on pursuits that feed your soul. When you do that, you no longer rely on others to define your emotional state. You reclaim it. Detachment, in the Stoic sense, isn't about becoming cold. It's about developing the inner strength to remain steady when everything else is shifting. And in that strength, you find not only peace, but true freedom. Number 2, detachment in practice. There's a quiet kind of suffering that most people carry without realizing it. It hides in the way we revisit memories that no longer serve us, in the way we keep spaces in our hearts for people who've long moved on, and in the way we imagine happiness as something just out of reach, tied to a different time, a different version of ourselves, or someone else's life entirely. The truth is, many of us remain emotionally stuck because we're afraid of what life might feel like without the familiar weight of the past. We convince ourselves that holding on is a sign of loyalty, or strength, or love. But in reality, it often comes from fear. Fear of uncertainty, of emptiness, of not knowing who we are if we stop identifying with a person, a moment, or a dream that's already gone. For a long time, I didn't know how much I was limiting myself by staying connected to people who no longer fit into my life. I told myself that history mattered more than growth, that comfort was a kind of love, and that walking away would make me cold. But eventually, I realized that clinging to what once felt safe was slowly closing me off from everything new and meaningful that life was trying to offer me. And then, there's the pressure of trying to keep up with a world that never stops showing you what you're supposedly missing. Open your phone, and suddenly, you're reminded of all the things you haven't done, all the places you haven't gone, all the relationships that seem more exciting than yours. But what we often forget is that these images are curated. They are fragments, edited to impress, designed to be consumed, not lived. Once I stopped trying to compare my life to these brief digital snapshots, something changed. I began noticing my own experiences more deeply. The small details, the quiet joys, the honest connections. And in those moments, I understood that real life isn't always impressive, but it's always real. And that's what gives it value. Many of us grow attached not to reality, but to fantasy. The fantasy of how things should have been, or how our lives should look. That illusion is what makes letting go feel impossible. But here's what the Stoics understood. Peace is only possible when we make a conscious decision to stop feeding the illusions and begin paying attention to what's actually in our control. Letting go doesn't mean you're abandoning your past. It means you're no longer allowing it to dictate your future. It means you're choosing presence over nostalgia, action over regret. When you stop allowing old emotions, outdated expectations, or imaginary comparisons to shape your daily choices, you create space for something more important: clarity. The Stoics didn't teach detachment as a way of running away from life. They taught it as a method of fully engaging with life, but from a place of strength, not desperation. When you let go of what no longer belongs to you, you begin to notice what always has. Your ability to grow, to change, to create meaning from within, regardless of what others do or think. You no longer need the approval of someone who left. You don't need to keep chasing the idealized image of a life that was never yours. And you certainly don't need to keep sacrificing your peace to compare your journey to someone else's filtered highlight reel. Letting go, in this deeper sense, is an act of courage. It's the moment you stop waiting for things to get better and start choosing what better means for you. It's the decision to reclaim your time, your focus, and your sense of self. Number 3. Understanding attachment. Most of us never pause to question where our emotional reactions come from. We think our stress, our jealousy, our constant dissatisfaction are just natural parts of life. But if you look a little deeper, you'll notice a pattern. These emotions often appear when we become overly attached to something outside ourselves. A person, a role, a specific outcome. And when that thing becomes threatened or unavailable, we feel as though part of us is crumbling. This reaction isn't love. It's not clarity. It's something else. A kind of inner distortion rooted in the belief that we are not enough unless something or someone completes us. That belief doesn't come from your heart. It comes from the part of your mind that's always seeking control, validation, and certainty. It's not your essence speaking. It's the constructed self, shaped by years of comparison, fear, and unmet expectations. This mental identity, which we often mistake for who we are, builds attachments to almost everything it encounters. It latches onto labels, status, opinions, even imagined futures. But the more it accumulates, the further we drift from our original clarity, the simple awareness we were born with, before life started layering noise over our natural sense of peace. The process of untangling from these layers is not easy. It requires the courage to admit that not everything we hold close is healthy for us. Some of the things we cling to the most are the very ones weighing us down. And until we release them, we won't know how light we can actually feel. True freedom begins when we no longer measure our value by the things we own, the people we impress, or the images we maintain. It begins when we stop chasing and start listening, not to the outside world, but to the quiet truth within us. That truth doesn't demand perfection. It doesn't fear rejection. It doesn't ask you to prove anything. It simply invites you to return to who you were before you thought you had to be someone else. Letting go isn't about walking away from everything. It's about no longer depending on what's unstable to define you. It's a return to inner steadiness, where joy is no longer conditional, and peace isn't something you have to chase. You don't need to be liked by everyone. You don't need your past to make sense. You don't need to constantly achieve more to be enough. These are ideas planted by a mind that forgot it was already whole. Of course, this shift doesn't happen overnight. You'll still catch yourself attaching meaning to things outside your control. That's human. But the difference is this: once you begin to see it clearly, you have a choice. You can either react from old patterns or respond from a deeper place. A place that no longer needs to grip so tightly to what was never yours to keep. And this isn't detachment in the cold, distant sense. It's not about rejecting emotions. It's about moving through life without being emotionally enslaved by every passing feeling or situation. It's about responding from your core, not your conditioning. Once you begin this shift, something beautiful happens. You stop seeing people as tools to validate you. You stop needing approval before you act. You stop being pulled into the illusion that happiness is somewhere out there. You begin to create your own center, calm, grounded, and open. Number 4, practice mindfulness and acceptance. There's something deeply empowering about realizing that not everything in your life needs to be controlled. In fact, most of the emotional strain we carry comes from trying to manage things that were never ours to shape in the first place. We try to predict outcomes, fix other people, or resist the natural course of events. And in doing so, we exhaust ourselves, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. But what if the way forward isn't about controlling more, but about releasing what was never truly yours to hold? Many of us go through life carrying an invisible burden, the belief that peace will only come once everything goes according to our plans. We think if people behave the way we expect, if situations align with our desires, then we can finally rest. But that day rarely comes. Life doesn't follow scripts. People don't stay the same. Circumstances evolve without asking for our permission. This is where a mental shift becomes necessary. When you stop investing your energy into fixing what's outside your influence, you begin to reclaim it for something far more powerful: the ability to direct your own thoughts and actions with purpose. That's where real influence lives. Not in changing the world around you, but in changing the way you respond to it. This shift requires awareness. Not the kind that rushes to conclusions, but the kind that watches patiently. When you start to observe your thoughts, really observe them, you'll begin to see how many of them are reactive, automatic, and driven by old patterns. You'll also notice that they pass, like weather, and don't need to control your decisions unless you give them permission to. Instead of getting caught in every emotional wave, you develop the skill of recognizing what's real and what's just noise. This doesn't mean becoming numb. It means becoming conscious. It means giving yourself a moment to choose how you want to show up, rather than being dragged around by impulses or fears that don't reflect who you are at your core. Another key part of this transformation is learning how to meet life as it is, not as you wish it were. Acceptance isn't giving up. It's not about settling for less or pretending to enjoy what hurts. It's about seeing clearly. It's about saying, "This is the moment I'm in. Now, what's the wisest way to meet it?" So much of our inner tension comes from wishing things were different. We create mental battles with reality, replaying what could have been, or dreading what might come. But when we stop resisting the moment, even if it's difficult, we begin to uncover a strange kind of peace, the kind that doesn't depend on perfection or certainty. This isn't easy. Our minds are conditioned to seek control, to crave outcomes, to chase certainty. But the more you lean into what you can guide, your attitude, your choices, your focus, the less fragile you become. Your sense of balance no longer hinges on things you can't guarantee. Letting go of control doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you care more wisely. You stop fighting battles that drain you and start investing in the areas of your life where real change begins. Inside. What you'll discover over time is that this shift changes everything. It softens your judgment. It sharpens your awareness. It gives you room to breathe, even in moments that once would have overwhelmed you. Number 5, set healthy boundaries. There's a point in life where we all have to make a decision. Will we allow the outside world to dictate how we feel, act, and live? Or will we take ownership of our internal world and finally draw the line? You might not notice it at first, but most of your emotional exhaustion likely comes from one thing: trying to manage what's outside your reach. Whether it's constantly adjusting yourself to fit someone's expectations, trying to fix people who aren't ready to change, or saying yes when your whole body wants to say no. Every time you ignore your own limits, you give away a piece of your stability. What many people call stress or anxiety is often just a lack of boundaries. It's the result of being too accessible, too available, too open to anything and anyone. Without realizing it, you've handed other people the ability to decide what your day feels like. But what if you could take that power back, calmly, without anger, without conflict, just through clarity? It starts with a simple yet powerful realization. You do not exist to please everyone. You are not responsible for managing how others interpret your choices. And not every situation deserves your emotional investment. Once this truth sinks in, something shifts. You begin to act not from guilt or fear, but from principle. That's what boundaries really are. They're not shields, they're standards. They're the lines that define what you will and will not accept. Not because you're cold or distant, but because you've learned the hard way what happens when you don't protect your energy. They help you live from a place of self-respect rather than self-sacrifice. When you start honoring these lines, the quality of your life changes. You stop chasing people who drain you. You stop over-explaining yourself. You stop apologizing for having needs. Instead, you begin showing up with a quiet certainty. You begin moving through life with a kind of grounded strength that doesn't need validation to exist. But let's be clear. Building these boundaries is not about cutting everyone off or living behind emotional walls. It's about learning to engage with others in a way that doesn't cost you your peace. It's about discerning who enriches your life and who only adds confusion. And sometimes, it's about walking away from what once felt familiar. Not because it's wrong, but because it no longer fits where you're going. This isn't a theory. It's a practice. A way of living that must be developed daily. It means listening to your discomfort, paying attention to that subtle tension when something doesn't feel right. It means speaking up, even when your voice trembles. It means stepping away from situations that drain your spirit, even if they once felt like home. Boundaries also allow room for healthier, deeper connections. Because when you respect your own limits, you naturally attract those who will do the same. You stop tolerating relationships built on guilt, manipulation, or one-sided effort. Instead, you make space for mutual care, for honest communication, for growth that benefits everyone involved. When you truly live by your principles, not by pressure, you begin to experience a kind of freedom that's rare. You're no longer easily shaken. You don't react to every emotional tug. You become selective with your time, your words, your focus. And from that place, your life begins to reflect who you really are, not who you've been conditioned to be. This is the kind of internal discipline that leads to a meaningful life. A life not ruled by impulse or approval, but by wisdom. Not reactive, but responsive. Not scattered, but centered. Thank you for spending your time with this video. I truly appreciate you being here. If something in today's message spoke to you, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Your perspective might just help someone else on their journey too. And if you'd like to see more content like this, feel free to subscribe and join this growing community of thoughtful minds. Until next time, take care and keep walking the path with purpose and clarity.